Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Julie's Orchids. On the table before you, you see a lot of little bottles of chemicals and chemically-like stuff and a pH meter. Today, we are not going to be discussing plant pH and how the plants take up nutrients at different pH levels. We are going to be discussing care and calibration of your pH meter. So do stick around. We'll learn what we can about taking care of our equipment. Okay, so today we're looking at a whole bunch of chemicals and a pH meter. And one thing that there is on the internet are plenty of good videos about pH and your orchids and what pH levels your orchids need to absorb the most appropriate nutrients. Today we're going to hit the other side of that program, which is talking about how do we monitor pH, and most importantly, how do we take care of our pH and make sure that we get accurate readings. We're going to discuss that today, so let's begin with our products. Again, as I mentioned, there's a couple really good internet videos out there on pH, pHing your water, pHing it up, pHing it down, why the need for that. About 6 years ago, Rick L. over at Rick L. Orchids did a very good video on pH and its importance for nutrient uptake in orchids. And then about 2 years ago, Nina over at Ninja Orchids did a more updated one. I'm going to put a video link to Rick's video in here. Give that one a look first. As I mentioned, the information he's provided is a little bit dated. It's a 6-year-old video. And then I'm definitely going to put a link to Ninja Orchids video on pH. Both are excellent videos. I would watch Rick L's first, and then I would watch the more up-to-date information that Nina has. Obviously, there's a good 4 years between the two videos, and there was some really good research done that updated sort of the calcium magnesium portion of Rick L's video. So Nina at Ninja Orchids has the more up-to-date information. And as I mentioned, we're not going to talk about pH of your water. We're going to talk about taking care of your pH meter and your pH products. So the first thing we're going to have a look at is our pH meter. They're not real exciting. When you're not using your pH meter, you want to make sure you have it turned off, obviously, to save your battery life. You want to store it in its cap. I don't know if you can see that there is some fluid in my cap, and there's a little squishy, spongy thing in there. So to keep everything happy and healthy, the paperwork that came with this pH meter, it's a new pH meter for me, indicated that you need to keep the workings inside underneath here moist. So I've had this pH probe storage liquid, and I can't say that I ever really used it, which is probably why my old pH meter died. But basically, every 1 or 2 weeks, you want to replace the little bit of fluid that's in there with this stuff, and then just this makes sure that the probes and sensors inside here are healthy. Now, one thing I want to point out, you'll notice in your pH meters, you've got this little glass ball. That is actually the sensor to it. Now, what you do not want to do is touch anything in here. Just don't touch anything in here at all. Just don't touch it. Just don't do it. When you're done doing your pH testing, rinse your pH meter off under the tap water, and then I rinse it again under RO water, and then I put it in here. Now, once every month or two, I use pH probe cleaner. And this is a really easy product to use. You just basically pour enough into a container that you can completely submerge all the working bits in there, and you let it set for a couple hours, and then you just pretty well rinse that stuff off. So this is how you clean it. I do it once a month. This is how you store it. You put a little bit of this in your cap. My pen came with a little sponge. If yours doesn't, get a little piece of sponge, stick it in the bottom, put a little bit of this in. It really takes dribbles and drops, not that much at all. And that will ensure that your sensor unit maintains its healthiness and cleanliness. So now I'm going to put this down for a minute, and I'm going to bring these products to the forefront. You can see here that I've got special cups, and each one of these has their own little pipette sort of stuck to the side of the container. This is where I want to mention something and mention it, and I hope I can stress the importance of this. You do not want to accidentally cross-contaminate your pH up and your pH down or your buffer solutions. So you'll see here that I've got each one of these labeled to correspond to their individual bottles. And when I'm done with them, I store them like this so that I cannot accidentally mix stuff around. Now, with your pH up and pH down, if you get a little bit of pH down in your pH up, you have pH neutral. And vice versa. If you get this mixed up, it's going to completely negate what these do. So you need to be very pedantic about never the two shall mix. So keep your very own little pipette for your pH up and your very own pipette for your pH down, and you should be fine, because never the two shall meet. These are good neighbors, but they don't want to hang out at each other's house. Likewise, same with your buffer 4 and your buffer 7. You don't want to mix things up. These ones might not be as big as a problem. Obviously, if you accidentally mix them up, you're pouring the stuff into here, you just get new little cups. This one, if you put this in your pH down, squeeze it out, and then put the same one back into your pH up, you just throw these products away. You've really messed them up. So let's get to the why do we want to make sure that our readings are accurate. Well, as I mentioned, Nina and Rick at Ninja Orchids and Rick L. Orchids, respectively, have done really good videos to show that your pH levels of your water really does affect how your plants can absorb the nutrients and the different nutrients that can be absorbed at different pH ranges. So you want to keep your pH in sort of the sweet spot, about 6.2 to 6.5, or right at the 7-ish mark and a little bit under. Again, I'm not going to go into specifics on that because Nina and Rick did both such a good job. Go look at those videos. Now I'm going to say look at Rick's first and then watch Nina's for the more up-to-date information. And I'm saying that Nina's is more up-to-date because I've done some research and I've looked at the ranges that Rick had on his video versus the ones that Nina has on hers. And then I got onto Google Scholar and I did a whole lot of research. And the more accurate research, particularly coming out of some of the Indian scholars. I'll try to find the peer-reviewed paper that I found last night and maybe put a link into it in the description below. But it really basically confirmed that you're picking up your calcium at a little bit higher pH than Rick L. had initially said. So I want you to look closely at Nina's graph on pH and nutrients uptake, because hers is the more recent one. And if I can find the article, like I said, I found only one article was a peer-reviewed paper. It was someone's thesis for their PhD. So it's been peer-reviewed. And it agrees with Nina that your sweet zone for your calcium uptake is a little bit higher than what Rick L. said. So you don't have to go down quite so far for calcium. It's your trace minerals, your molybdenum, your iron, and the whatnot that really really need the 5.5, 5.8 to be absorbed. But we'll discuss what they do for the manufacturers to help you with that. So now, a few weeks ago, I fired off a question to Rick L. over at Rick L. Orchids, and I was asking specifically about chelated iron. I had bought a new brand of calcium magnesium with iron, and it said that the iron was chelated, and I always thought that they were chelating the calcium and magnesium onto the iron to make it easier to absorb, and that's not the case. All right, so looking at Nina's chart on her video on pH, it says that the calcium is picked up and the magnesium at a higher pH, so more 6.8, 6.5, than say your trace elements, your molybdenum and your iron. So now, speaking specifically to iron, plants do need iron just the same way as every human and living thing needs iron. And iron has a kind of a narrow window to be absorbed in. So when you get things like calcium, magnesium with iron, it is the iron that is chelated. So chelate means that it's bound to something else that makes it more readily absorbable by the plant. So the iron in my calcium and magnesium is chelated, which means it's more readily absorbable by the plant. For my plants to get the iron, I don't have to drop my pH down as far as if it was non-chelated. I hope that makes sense. But that's not being a chemist and just getting on to Google Scholar and asking some of my friends at the local uni who teach chemistry what that means. That's the way it was explained to me. Now we're just going to take these and get these out of the way, and I'm going to go over how and why. So why do we want to calibrate this? Well, because we want to make sure we have accurate pH readings. Why is that? Because plants take up nutrients in the sweet spot pH zone. So how often do you need to calibrate your pH meter? Well, that's going to entirely depend on A, the size of your collection, B, how often you give nutrients. Like me, I do this once a month, and every time I change the batteries or when I get a new pen. If you fertilize a lot more frequently, you may need to do your calibrations weekly. And if you've got a lot of mounts and you're doing, watering multiple times a day, you might want to check your pH daily. Now, most of your pH pens have pretty, we'll just call it idiot-proof instructions on how to calibrate your pH machine. And I'm going to take a moment here to sort of pour out the products. So again, never the two shall meet. This will never go there. This will never go here. We're only going to put buffer 7 in buff 7 and buffer 4 in buff 4. Why? Because we don't want to cross-contaminate. When you're dealing with pHs, you do not want to cross-contaminate. So I'm just going to pour enough of this buff 7 in here to cover the probe height. And you can see that that's a, nice color. Kind of looks like blue Kool-Aid. So I'm going to stress this. This stuff is caustic. You do not drink it. You do not ingest it. And you need to be keeping it away from small children that might look at these colorful cups of pretty liquid and go, ooh, I want to give that a drink. It will kill them. Keep it away from little kids. Keep it away from little kids. Keep it away from little kids. I don't know how many times I need to say that. So what else do we need here? Well, we need something to rinse in between our calibrations. So I'm going to go grab a little bit of RO water, and I'll be right back. So now we've got our RO water, and we're going to use that to just clean this in between things. Now, the important thing to know is that when you start your calibration process, you want to start with neutral first. So your buff 7. So 7 is considered pH neutral, and always start with pH neutral or closest to pH neutral first. Now, some of your pens are going to have a 3-step buffering solution. So they'll have a, buff 4, buff 7, and buff 10. This one works just fine with just the 2-step. And again, if you're doing this, make sure you start with pH neutral first. And so what we're just going to do is we're going to turn this bad boy on. We can see it's coming on. And now we're just going to stick it into buff 7. And we're going to hit the button that says Cal. And it's going to calibrate itself. And we can see the numbers there. And when it's happy with it, it will do exactly that. So this means that this is calibrated. We're going to give that a rinse off into our water here. And then we're going to put it into our buff 4. And we're just going to hit Cal button again. It's going to say Cal. We're going to leave it sitting there. And it should say SAEN, saying it's done SAEN. We have just calibrated our machine. So now I'm going to give this another little rinse off. And we're good. Put the lid back on it. Turn the power off. And you're now ready to mix your liquids. So as I mentioned earlier, this stuff to little kids looks kind of nice and tasty, but it's caustic and it's not very healthy for them. So as soon as you're done, pour this stuff out. Now it says to pour it out and not pour it back into the bottle, and it seems like a waste of stuff. So if you have a container that you can put a lid on and store these a little bit longer, go for it. I don't, so I'm just gonna pour these out. Where am I going to pour these out to? To be honest with you, I'm going to take them outside to an area that's covered in weeds, and I'm going to pour it directly on top of the weeds that I want to die, and we're going to hope it kills them. So I'll be right back because I want to get rid of these. Not that I have small children in the house, but just to make a point. And again, label everything clearly so that you do not accidentally cross-contaminate your pH neutral with your pH acid and basic, all right? You want to keep things very not cross-contaminated. Well, there you have it, guys. So this is what you need to do to take care of your testing equipment. And yes, you do need to test because you want to make sure that your pH is in the right zone for your plants to get the nutrients that you're giving them picked up. Because if you're spending the money on the nutrients and your pH level is like at a 7.5, you're not going to be picking up a lot of the nutrients. You're basically throwing your money away. So spend the money on getting a very good pH meter. Now, this one I paid $85 for, and it's a only pH meter. I used to have a combination pH meter, TDS meter. That one died. That was a cheapy one off of Amazon, and that lasted about 1.5 years, 2 years. So I've seen other videos on YouTube that said take the time, spend the money, and invest in a fairly expensive one. There are definitely far more expensive ones than this, but this one was what was in my budget, so I went with a mid-ranged price one, and it should do fine. Keep your lid of your probe with a little bit of pH probe storage on a little tiny sponge inside, and really that's all the more you need in there. You see that? That's really it. And once a month or so, give it a good pH probe clean. And again, this is just let it sit there for an hour in this stuff and then rinse it off and you're fine. Keep very pedantic about not cross-contaminating your products, either your buffing solution or your actual pH up and pH down. How do you do that? Do what I've done. Get a lackey band and just stick your individual pipette for each individual bottle on the lackey band, and you know you will never, ever have the problem of cross-contamination. Okay, guys, so a quick lesson on how to take care of your pH meter so that you know you're getting accurate pH results. How to care for it, how to maintain it, when do we calibrate it, and how to calibrate it. When you get one of these, do take the time to read the product inserts. It will tell you everything you need to know on how they want your individual pin done. It's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. It takes about, how long did that take us? 2 minutes, if that. So 2 minutes of your time to make sure that your pH meter is well tuned so that you can make sure your orchids are getting the maximum out of the nutrients, fertilizer, and CalMag that you give them. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. A subscribe would be fantastic. As I mentioned earlier, don't forget to go have a look at Rick L. Orchid's video. It's about 6 years old, so the information is a little bit dated as far as the calcium levels. And then when you're done watching that, follow it up with Ninja Orchid. Nina has a fabulous, more up-to-date graphs and information on what nutrients are picked up at what pH levels. And again, this is something that you really kind of have to monitor through the time, because they're doing a lot of research now on this. And as more research comes out, things are changing. We see this right here from the 6-year-old video that Rick L. has that says calcium kind of drops off at being picked up at 5.8 and above, whereas the one Nina has is indicating that you've got a bigger range through to even 7 where you're picking up the calcium, and it's more your trace elements such as your molybdenum that is needing that very low 5.8, 5.6 pH to do it. There you go. That's our quick talk on how to care for your pH meter and how to properly calibrate it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Again, if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. A subscribe would be really appreciated, and have a fabulous day.